Hello everyone, I'm the EFC. This is Blue Line CV. Welcome to another talking point discussion video. In today's video, don't expect it to be an hour or even 45 minutes long. It's going to be between 15 to 20 minutes. It's going to be very streamlined and very focused. And today's video, me and Joe Tweedy are going to be talking about whether we should start panicking now because the window's ending soon. In a way, it is ending in 7.5 days because the window does end at 5 p.m. on the 10th. We're not really seeing much. I'm personally not hearing much at all. The only thing I'm hearing about currently are developments in regards to, talking to players, which isn't giving me with, it's not filling me with much confidence right now. But Joe, obviously, you're an expert in this field. Do you think Chelsea fans should be panicking right now, or do you think we should be, remain patient, stick with the program, and things are going to become good, before the window ends?
I think for me, there's probably two schools of thought I've got at the moment, and one is that I look at kind of our competitors and mainly looking at teams kind of in and around us in the top six. And no one really, bar Liverpool, has done that much that worries me this season. And I think from that respect, that gives me some comfort. However, what I would say is I think probably we had a lot more to do than other teams. So where maybe if they've remained fairly consistent in terms of their squad depth, squad strength, etc., I think Jorginho is a fantastic add. However, I think we had probably more to do. And I'm looking particularly in terms of adding goals to the team because I think you and I both, we chat a lot on WhatsApp, and I don't think our opinion of Morata is that he's going to be maybe that guy. Maybe something drops to him this season, but I think looking at him in pre-season, I can't really see that sort of cutting edge that we need up front, particularly where we don't have that many goals coming from midfield. I don't think that Morata is going to be that guy, and I would have loved to have seen us go and buy a top centre forward and maybe someone who can add goals in terms of just like a general forward player, so maybe a winger / striker. But for me, I'm a little bit concerned at the moment. I'm kind of like you. I'm hearing that that we're doing a lot of talking, but I think when you see how long it can take Chelsea to conclude negotiations, the fact that there is now 7 days to go, and maybe in some cases, I think that we do need, I would say, maybe one or two major kind of incomings, particularly if Courtois goes. You could say 3, so 7.5 days roughly to conclude what I think maybe we need, maybe 2, maybe 3 players. And then I think time is definitely running out. But I imagine that we're being active behind the scenes. I think what you said at the beginning is right. We're doing a lot of talking, but at the moment I think we need to see a little bit more because I'm looking at certain areas in the team during pre-season, and I'm not going too strong on pre-season and analysis. I think the team will be kind of better, in sort of the second and third months of the season. But there are some kind of glaring, not overwhelming weaknesses, but to be where we need to be. I think there are some kind of fairly obvious weaknesses in the side that probably need to be addressed. So I'm kind of hopeful that in the next 7.5 days, that if we can pick up maybe a winger, maybe a forward, and potentially I'm thinking maybe a fullback of some description, I think I'd be quite happy. Yeah,
I understand what you're saying. I'm going to say something controversial, but I'll keep it for a bit later on during the stream. But again, I'm panicking a bit because I'm thinking, surely at this stage we're hoping to try and finalize these deals instead of, starting discussions with certain players. Now, you guys, tomorrow I will release a video. There's a certain goalkeeper that we've been talking to recently, but again, everything's been pretty informal, which I find a bit crazy. And, it could really say something in regards to Courtois' future as well. But, of course, hearing about Zaha on top of that. Now, for me, it seems a bit realistic. I think when it comes to Martial and Bailey, I don't really think there are any new developments, really. I think everything's pretty much the same how it was. Maybe with a deal like this, things to be happening behind the scenes. I mean, let's be serious. It's not as if we're going to hear every single thing that's happening at Chelsea. But I when we signed Jorginho, and I agree with your tweet earlier, I think he is the best signing so far in the Premier League. I think for with how pissed off Pep Guardiola was, he would have really transformed their entire midfield because he's better than Fernandinho. which is as clear. And that's the type of midfield player that Pep loves to have. He had it in Xavi, had it in Philip Lahm in the sense as well. But I really thought with that signing, that would have been, you would have pushed on and started to, finalize other deals. Now, of course, this is where guys like Rugani and guys like what's his name as well, Rugani and Golovin come into play. Now with Golovin, let's be it came down to we couldn't really promise him the game time that he wanted or the position he wanted as well. So that's understandable. But I don't know, it kind of feels like, well, he left it till that late. You know what I mean? And also with Rugani as well, it brings up the discussion, why did we even waste time trying to pursue this guy in the first place? Which really baffles me. And in a way, it's kind of like we've wasted time on two players that amounted to nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that Chelsea are incredibly guilty of is it's kind of the art of the perfect deal. They very rarely are kind of willing to buy players at a price that another team is setting. And I think considering that if you look at, or if you believe some of the reports around Willian and the kind of money that we sold Oscar for, those sorts of prices are super inflated. Even, you think Oscar went for 60 million a couple of seasons ago, which at the time seemed absolutely mental that he went for that kind of money. So we're kind of really, we're kind of very good, I suppose, at kind of extracting that kind of money from other teams. But when it comes to us paying those sorts of prices, we feel, to me, a little bit reluctant to pull the trigger. And, a lot of these players that we've been linked to, I know that, for example, Chelsea were never, ever, from the information I know, were ever really interested in Higuain. I think that's something I've been saying for a long, long time to you privately, that wasn't the case. But players that we have been linked to publicly, I think, Rugani, there was an opportunity to just pay the money and get him in if you really want him. I think Golovin is a case of playing the time. But I don't know. It just feels again like we've kind of gone down this road of not really kind of wanting to pay the money that's in the market now. And I think the fact that sometimes when you buy or when you've been able to get players like Kante for 32 million £32 million, you're not able to do that every single window. And I think we're trying to find the perfect player at the perfect price. And as someone who negotiates a lot in work, it's not always a case where you present your ideal scenario and it happens every single time. Yes. It's rare in any case that happens, particularly when it comes to negotiating for footballers who have got significant time left on their contracts. There's no incentive for Juventus to sell Rugani or any other player that we've been linked to with them. And I think you'll probably see the same with Zaha and with potential goalkeepers that we're being linked to as well. So, it's a question for me of how ambitious do the club want to be. I know that they're in the Europa League this season, so for me, I think that suggested that the spending wasn't necessarily going to be there. We've kind of seen this sort of one in, one out, or one out and one in policy for a number of years now, where I don't want to do the whole net spend thing, because I think it's a little bit of a red herring at times. But our net spend each season is particularly low for a top four team, and it has been for a while. So, it's a question of, I think we've got too many players who are coming towards the end of their peak, or maybe don't fit the system, or maybe need to be moved on. Yeah, who have got incredibly good contracts. And they're not going to command that sort of money elsewhere. So it makes them very difficult to sell. And I think what we've seen is because we haven't sold that many players. And I would have thought at the beginning of summer that a lot more a lot more senior players would have been moved on to kind of to supplement a new series of spending. So it's a tricky one. But the next 7 days, I still think we need to go out and do something with someone, at least a forward, because. I'm looking at that front three, and how exciting Hudson-Odoi is. It's a lot of pressure to put on a 17-year-old to just say, okay, put you in a team now. You're going to be sort of our $20 a season player. I'd rather get in someone who's a bit more proven, and then I think feed Hudson-Odoi into the team. You mentioned Zaha earlier, and I think actually last season some of his best football was actually playing at centre forward. So I think that there's a hint of maybe Chelsea looking at him down the middle. With that obviously opens up the opportunity for Hudson-Odoi to play on the right, Hazard on the left, and Zaha down the middle maybe. But
you're right. I think with Zaha, he does have that versatility in his game. Like you said, and the stats show it too. his best football was through the middle, playing as a centre forward, but he's got that versatility where he can play on the left and on the right and in the middle as well. And I don't know. I kind of think maybe with Zaha, do you think there's a chance that either one of Morata or Mitchell will leave? Because, I mean, again, this window's been really weird. You know, you were talking about the fact that we haven't got rid of players just yet. And for me, I wouldn't say it's a worrying thing, but that's something that stood out the most for me, that we haven't got rid of these players as quickly as possible. And we've left it right to the end. And I'm thinking, can you really command the money you want if you're leaving it right to the end? I'm not too sure, especially when, when I think when clubs, pretty much know the players Chelsea don't want to keep anymore. I mean, I do tell people as well, let's not forget there is the January window that comes up.
Yep.
A lot of times we sell a lot of players during the January window. Of course, Diego Costa was an example. Before that, guys like Mikel, Ivanovic, Oscar. Before that, Ramirez and others, and I think Torres and others as well. So, that's another window for us to get rid of players on top of that. But yeah, I don't know. I've kind of seen it as, we constantly put our eggs in too many baskets. And I think recently this is what's been affecting us, because let's say, for example, a deal doesn't go through, like the Golovin thing. Now, again, we agreed the fee, agreed the wages and contracts with him. I mean, Golovin's friends and people are even stating that they think he's signing for Chelsea. It's clear that it was probably an 11th hour change of heart, where maybe, Emanalo probably gassed them up. You know how Emanalo is. And then he was like, maybe it makes sense for me to go to Monaco first before I go to Chelsea. And, all that time and investment was wasted. And maybe, let's say, other targets we could have been looking at, let's say you've placed Golovin as your number one. By the time that deal ends and you don't get him, can you even get your number two or number three? The market isn't going to wait for you. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I think it brings up something interesting. I think I was touching upon it in a private conversation, but I was thinking, do you think this window, in regards to Marina Granovskaya, I'm always messing up her name. Do you think now that she's really blown her big chance? Because in a way, this was like her transfer window where she was really in control of what she could have done. And I kind of think it's been another scenario where it's looking like it's imploding a tiny bit. Maybe I'm sounding a bit too cynical, or I'm not seeing the bigger picture, but this is why you're here, because then you can obviously inform us.
I mean, I think personally there's kind of two flavors of spin to this. I think if you're being slightly more positive towards it and maybe slightly more understanding, I think fans at times don't necessarily appreciate the commercial implications of not having Champions League football and maybe where we came in the Premier League as well. I think there's like a 60-70 million pound difference in terms of the money that we get in from the potential money. So the winner of the Champions League gets, I think it's something like 5.5 or 6 times the sort of the money that you would win for winning the Europa League. So I think there has been an element of the club have had their hands tied slightly behind their back. Equally, I think a lot of ambitious players don't necessarily want to be playing in the Europa League, and I don't see that, particularly on social media, that doesn't seem to be something that people are happy to kind of discuss, or even sort of kind of really sort of entertain that possibility that, we're Chelsea, we're a big club. We've only been in the Champions League once in the past 3 seasons. So I think that there's an element of maybe realism in some of the targets we've been looking at. But I mean, if you want to be slightly more cynical, I think that this window reflects a pattern of negotiating, particularly in terms of the style of how we negotiate, that we've seen many, many times. And, my sort of favourite example is the whole John Stones situation when we were trying to buy him. And, rightly or wrongly, whatever you think about the player, the fact that Chelsea started the bidding at about £22 million and he sold for 50, I mean, that's our valuation was 100%, over 100% less than what Everton actually sold him for. So the fact that we spend this long doing these very, very small incremental negotiations, trying to get this perfect deal and push things through, I think sometimes, and I think you're seeing that maybe in the case of why we always seem to sign players so late, is that we're so obsessed with the bottom line that actually, we're kind of, as you say, and it's not like we're going out. We might have, for example, agreed personal terms with Martial. We might have agreed personal terms with Zaha or other players, and then by the time that deal falls through, because we've spent 7 days or 7 months trying to negotiate a transfer fee with another club, then you've got no chance to go for your backup. And that's how you end up with players like Zappa Costa, Danny Drinkwater. That's how you end up with these sorts of guys, is because you end up needing bodies, and you just think, right, let's just go and buy someone. You know, there might be plan D, E, or F. They might not even be plan B. So, I think that's a cynical viewpoint. For me personally, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I mean, I kind of appreciate the lack of Champions League football, lack of maybe some of the commercial elements in terms of the club, with the lack of Champions League football as well, from that sort of side, as well as the playing side is maybe making us less attractive to clubs, and maybe the money isn't quite there to just go out and spend 70, 80, 90 million pounds on players. But also, I think some of the way that we negotiate with clubs it is not always the best. And I think, again, it's not like you start with a clean slate every single transfer window. These clubs will carry over some kind of bad feeling or ill will to Chelsea just because of how they've tried to negotiate in the past. If I'm trying to sell you something and I say it's 50 quid and you come in at £10, £11, £12, £13, £14, I'm just going to get pissed off with you at some point and just go, don't worry about it. That's how these things work. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in the middle, but I mean, I can definitely see both sides of the story. I think it was definitely her opportunity to shine. I think she's been hamstrung a little bit by the Europa League situation, by the lack of Champions League football, maybe by the lack of money. But still, I mean, the fact that to be fair, again, we have signed an exceptionally good player, but the fact that we've signed one player and we probably needed maybe another two of his quality, I don't think is a particularly good reflection on the club at the moment.
I understand what you're saying, of course. Thanks for giving us the bigger perspective. I made this point earlier, but I can't help bringing up the fact that, we were targeting someone like Rugani, and it's kind of like, what the hell was the point of his signature? There was no point to him. I don't think he's an upgrade to anyone. He'd have cost you more than 40 million on top of that. And how is it strengthening the team? It's not. And it's just like, maybe, I don't know. Sometimes some of these deals make no sense. Let's say you can get, let's say, hypothetically, a Martial, and he'd cost you, let's say, 20 extra million, over the fee that you'd pay for Rugani. Surely that's going to make more sense with the team as actually upgrading it. And then, when you sign that type of player, you actually save money in the long term, because then you don't have to buy someone for that position again. And this is what I mean when it comes down to these decision makings, because of course there is no director of football here right now. And as I keep saying, you guys all the time, and I have done videos on this a lot of times too over the year, when the new director of football does come, it's not going to be in the case of how Emanalo was. I mean, it's going to be completely different. They're literally going to be there to manage the loan army and look for players there, and they'll help with negotiations, of course. But it's not going to be a case of them saying we're going to get this player and that player, and then setting people out to try and get those targets. It's not going to be like that. So a director of football wouldn't even help really in this situation. I mean, maybe it might help in terms of negotiations. Maybe. I don't know. Of course, Marina is very good at negotiations. She knows how to play the hardball very well to get the deals she wants. But I don't know. Maybe I'm seeing it very simplistically. But there's that degree of not being flexible enough sometimes. I think sometimes it can be a bit too extreme at times. And I do call her that the female Daniel Levy quite a lot of times. It's just like it's always business decisions first over the footballing ones, and it gets to that point where it's like, I mean, what's really, are you in the right industry then, if that's what you really care about? Because, at the end of the day, the whole reason why you're trying to, invest money in a club and, do things to the benefit of the club is so, your club can win things. That's the whole point of sport. I'm not too sure. A lot of these targets, again, I'm not really hearing anything really new in regards to developments. Even the past few days, I mean, we've got 7 days left. These past 2 days, it's just been more inklings coming out and nothing concrete. And I think I really think it sums up how our window's starting to look like right now.
Here's an interesting situation, and I was talking about this with someone at the club that I know, and. Yeah. What if hypothetically, if we're talking about, I mean, you and I and others are very, very key, or very, very big, I should say, on giving young players opportunities. Now, Callum Hudson-Odoi has been kind of a bit of a revelation. I'm going to give it that it's pre-season, but he yesterday had a very good, I think, very good Premier League right back on toast for pretty much the entire game, and not in an overly, overly biased way. I mean, there were Arsenal fan TV after the game were saying that Bellerin was getting roasted by a teenager. Now, if there wasn't a World Cup, he's not going to play. He wouldn't have got these opportunities. But equally, if Chelsea had, say, gone out and bought Zaha, had gone out and bought Bailey had gone out and bought Pulisic, had gone out and bought some more forwards, then Hudson-Odoi doesn't get an opportunity to play in pre-season. Now, there's a really fine balance, I think, in wanting to go out and sign some of these top players and equally being able to provide an opportunity to someone like Hudson-Odoi, because I think from our chat with Nate Chalobah, the most obvious thing from me was that consistent games, consistent minutes, consistent starts, etc. That's how you build up your rhythm. That's how you become comfortable playing first team football. And the difference between Hudson-Odoi in the first game and against Arsenal, I mean, to me, he looks like he's got about 50% better in that very, very short space of time. He's more confident. He's demanding the ball. He seems to understand his off-the-ball duties even more now. So
taking more shots on goal as well.
Exactly, But none of this would have happened had Chelsea gone out and spent loads of money on forwards, which is what a lot of people wanted us to do. So, whether this is by design, the club have they've sort of kind of tested the water a bit with Pulisic and Zaha and some other players that we've been linked to, but maybe they've seen enough from Hudson-Odoi. I mean, this is me being slightly optimistic in how the club are approaching it. But I mean, it's an interesting scenario to pose that the club maybe have seen something in Hudson-Odoi and thought, you know what, we don't need to go out and spend 70 million on a winger. Let's keep maybe Pedro and Willian, and let's feed Hudson-Odoi into the starting 11 over the course of the season. So, yeah, I mean, I get the frustration of people, particularly fans who, I mean, myself again, I would have expected us to have signed at least another 2 players of kind of Jorginho's quality as starters. But, then again, it's kind of the other hand or the other side of that as well is that, if you do go and sign a left winger, or if you go and sign someone to play on the right, then Hudson-Odoi maybe isn't even, we're not even talking about him at this point in the pre-season. So it's a really fine balance. And, it's one of those where obviously you want the best players to be playing, but then there are times during the season where I think everyone gets frustrated that, certain senior players drop in and out of form, and then, an academy player is not trusted to go in and play. So maybe the fact that we've gone late, or that we might not sign someone, the long-term benefit could be, I stress that this is a very, very optimistic view on Chelsea, because, we haven't seen it happen really, that an English academy player comes through the academy straight into the first team and maybe cements himself a position. But, I think as a scenario, potentially, if that works in our favour, then maybe the club will pat themselves on the back. I think it's probably more by luck than design at this point. The fact that Hazard's not there, the fact that we haven't been able to buy anyone, the fact that Willian's been, lost his passport or whatever excuse he's got for trying to go to Manchester United. But that window was open for Hudson-Odoi because of either the club's inability to conclude deals or, I think the World Cup as well. So I'm hopeful that in some respects, if there is a negative side of the fact that we haven't been able to go out and get a top forward, maybe the positive is that Hudson-Odoi can step into that role and become a starter.
I agree with that. Of course, I'd love to talk about Callum right now, but I don't want to stray off topic with a video. But I mean, just one quick thing about Callum. I mean, it's obvious he's going to be playing against Man City, and he'll probably start the first game, in the Premier League as well. That's how it's looking like right now. And I mean, he's shown he's good enough. I mean, he completely destroyed Bellerin quite easily. He's playing with that confidence, and it's confidence that's been afforded to him by Sarri, where I'm sure. And I was saying it in the videos too. He encourages his guys to play with confidence. To make that pass if they don't do that, and to really play with freedom. And you can see that Callum's been benefiting from that pretty quickly, to be honest. So that's very interesting to see. But yeah, just to conclude the live stream, in your opinion, realistically now, how many players would you like to see come in, and who would those players be for what positions?
So I'm gonna make an assumption, and I would say at this point that it is an assumption. It's not something that I've been told by anyone. But if Courtois does go, I mean, I think Jack Butland is just the obvious solution, and I think it's not a name that's going to excite people. I would say that people that I know who work at a goalkeeper agency or an agency that's got a lot of goalkeepers on their books called World in Motion, they were telling me that they're kind of sort of football analytics guys. They think Butland's actually a really good goalkeeper. They go through the data, and he's a lot better than some of his kind of raw stats suggest. So there might be something there in him playing for a better team. I think Butland is the obvious one, just because I think Stoke will play ball. I don't think he'll cost a lot of money. I think other options that you're aware of are going to be, you know, probably 50, 60 million pounds. Are we going to spend that on a goalkeeper? Probably not.
Oh.
So I think Butland potentially is one that comes in.
You might have to repeat that. Might have to repeat that point again. It was starting to lag a tiny bit.
Yeah. So I think I just don't see us spending 50, 60 million pound on a goalkeeper. And I think if that's going to be the case, or if that was the case, then I think we would have got Alisson, because we would have just bid more than Liverpool. So I can see in that respect Butland coming in. In terms of other positions, I would like us to go for Zaha. I think I'm just being sort of realistic rather than sort of the ideal scenario. I think it seems like anyway from the reports, I think in the Evening Standard tonight, that he's pushing for a move away from Crystal Palace at this point. So, you know, I think he would be a good fit. And as you say, he can play pretty much anywhere across the front three. So he brings flexibility, but I think also he brings a bit of directness, which I think we do lack at times. If he also comes in, and then maybe the last one, probably someone in midfield, maybe, or centre forward. I mean, if we can get rid of Morata and bring in anyone who's half decent, I would be quite happy for that. I mean, I just don't see Morata being that guy, and this isn't really this is an opinion that I've had from before when we signed him. I don't see him being that guy. So if he can go out and can get someone in that's half decent, but I mean, preferably I'd rather just play Batshuayi, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, I maybe two. So if we say a goalkeeper in for Courtois and maybe Zaha, and then I don't know if we did sell any players, I imagine we'll get some squad fillers in. But I'm not being. I just don't see us doing too much. I mean, a lot of the papers are suggesting we'll be quite active. But I mean, as you say, it's 7 days to go now. When we're not exactly the world's quickest negotiators, and you know, the closer you kind of get towards the window closing, the more volatile the market becomes, the more expensive players become, because teams know that, you know, if we're trying to do deals on the last day, they have 12 hours to get a replacement. So
of course, it's
going to be tough. But Zaha would be the target, and then maybe a goalkeeper.
Yeah, I agree. It goes back to that, you know, how we signed Drinkwater in the end. It was like, what, 3 deals, 3 offers made in that 24-hour period. So, I mean, it is, you know, it was pretty ridiculous. But yeah, you know, when it comes to my players, to be honest, I'd probably keep Courtois. And I know it's risky because there's a big chance that he could be leaving on a free. And you know, I can admit to, when it comes to analyzing the strengths of goalkeepers and, you know, what's the difference between a world-class one and a good one, I don't really know those nuances as much. You know, I'm not as sophisticated with that. But, you know, with someone like Jack Butland, I don't know, maybe it's a fan of me. I'm not as inspired by that.
No.
I kind of feel that with someone like Courtois, you know, let's say you say, you know what, Courtois, you stay with us for 1 more year. We'll let you go at the end of next season. During that time, I mean, number one, Madrid could be like, well, maybe, you know, if we want to target someone like Neymar or Mbappe for next season, maybe Courtois isn't really needed. And there's a possibility too that, you know, with the positive vibes in the dressing room under Sarri, that could encourage Courtois to stay. You know, things happen and change all the time. And yeah, I kind of think that instead of wasting time targeting a goalkeeper, we don't really need to, I'd probably just stick with Courtois for the season. I think for me, it's got to be Martial. You know, either one of Michy or Morata got to go. I'd probably say Morata because you can get more money. And you know, there's been so many reports of you know, interest from Italy, and who knows if Juventus might try coming with an offer for him. I mean, now they've replaced Higuain. Will they use Ronaldo up front? I'm not too sure. I can kind of see them, you know, using Ronaldo on the left, Costa on the right, Dybala in the middle, Mandzukic up front. For now, I don't know, but yeah, for me, it's got to be Martial there, 100% type of player we need. You know, as you've been saying, as others have been saying as well, you know, we've been speaking with his agent for how long. It would just be a shame if it was, you know, amount to nothing in the end, especially when it looks like, you know, Martial does want to leave Man United on top of that. And, you know, this is where this is why this video was created today, because, you know, it's a bit of a tricky situation, you know, when these guys want to join the club and what's letting us down is the negotiating. I kind of feel that it's not good enough in that sense, especially when there seems to be no clear structure and planning. I mean, honestly, in a way, you know, I wasn't disappointed that Rugani and Golovin fell through. I didn't really want them, to be honest. I didn't really care too much for them. And I just find it kind of ironic in the end that all that time was wasted when it could have been wasted on other players. But actually, let me ask you this quickly before I end the players I want. You know, in regards to that last point I was making, when clubs target a player, will they target, like, let's say all of their targets at once? Like, will there be a team of people and, like, separate individuals will target separate players, or is it kind of like, okay, we target this guy and then we move on to this guy, or is it like more manageable? So let's say two players targeted at a time, and another two players targeted at a time. Like, how does it really work?
So typically what you'll see is a club will approach the intermediaries or agents of players and initially start a feeling out process. And depending on how receptive that player is to moving, they then kind of get put into like positions like 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. I would say probably from what I know about how Chelsea scout is that they are typically, they're typically looking at 100 and 150 players at any time, sort of in terms of scouting. And in terms of talking to those players, probably I would say if you're looking at position groups, they've maybe got 1 or 2 that they're talking to in terms of trying to establish a commercial package for the player that fits the agent and the intermediaries, etc. So the kind of personal terms aspects of the deal is always kind of done first. Once that's sort of concluded out of the way, you're kind of then left to the devices of the club. So you may have, I think, probably, let's say 2 players kind of concurrently running at sort of any one point for each position group. So that may be Golovin and this Ficino guy or whatever it is. I can never say his name properly. Was probably the second choice. I mean, I know sort of earlier in the transfer window that Chelsea were looking at Lewandowski, so he would maybe have been the first choice. I think that's gone very cold now.
Yeah.
Maybe Martial was sort of the second choice, that kind of race to the front. So I would say that they're probably working on keeping 2 players, what I would say, like warm. So they're kind of keeping them warm because they know if they can get the breakthrough with the club, they've probably 75%, 80% there in terms of the personal terms. So that final piece of work to kind of conclude the deal, it might be image rights, player bonuses, whatever is going to come into the equation, sort of happens in that phase once maybe the fee's been agreed. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what they've been doing. I think you've seen Chelsea, in terms of centre-backs, look at both the Italians, so it's Rugani and is it Caldara? I can never remember the other guy's name. But again, it's a question of always having, I would say, 2 players that they're looking at concurrently sort of at any one point. And, I think in some cases the strength of feeling on the second player means that, that they really are there as primary, as a backup. And in some cases, if there's not a huge kind of draw from the club, or if there's not a huge consensus on them within the scouting department, then, they're really just there maybe as kind of a negotiating kind of ploy. So you might be saying to Golovin, this is the deal, take it or leave it because we're interested in this, this other player, etc. So, and if that agent then talks to the representative of that players, then they can confirm, yep, we've had discussions, there's something on the table. But in most cases, it's kind of a negotiation ploy from the club. So, yeah, I mean, typically I would say 2 players. Some cases it can be more. I think probably this summer we've maybe been talking to maybe 4 goalkeepers quite in detail, maybe 80%, 85% the way there in terms of commercials and sort of the general player package. But I think it's that's kind of the case. But to your point about sort of wasting time on players, I think quite often it's a negotiation with the club, which I think we let drag on too long.
Yeah,
I know that particularly sort of the Rugani stuff and Jorginho, the actual player side of it was done incredibly quickly, 2-3 days max. This is going to be the package. This is what you're on. This is all your bonuses. This is all the other stuff that's important to you. All of that gets done pretty quickly. It's really the negotiation side with the club that I think we seem to spend ages on. And I think you're right. I think once you get to a point where you keep coming back with an improved bid and then the club are asking for more, we saw it with Juventus and Alexandro. That bid kept going up and up and up and up and up.
Yeah.
So
same thing with Rugani. It was the same thing.
Exactly,
I mean, originally it was 40 million euros. Yeah, 40 million euros. Then they want 45 and 50 and 55. Ridiculous.
Yeah. So I think it's a question of the club maybe having to realise that they should cut their losses and run a little bit quicker than what they have done, because you're right, we've sort of come into the final week of the window now. We've been chasing, I would say, Golovin and Rugani are absolute definites that we've been players that we've been interested in, and neither of them are here. It looks like Rugani is going to stay at Juventus. So it gives us really 7 days to push on quite a few positions. So, it's going to be tough. And I think the danger is, again, you spend so long trying to be focused on the bottom line and not paying such a ridiculous amount of money, and then you end up having to overpay in the last week because you've not necessarily planned your negotiation strategy that well. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but I think the club are, if they want a centre half, they're going to overpay. If they want any other players now, they're going to have to overpay. That's just the nature of what they've left themselves with.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, again, it's going to be a very fairness question, but do you think maybe Marina could survive having another window like this if it panned out like this? I mean, let's be serious. We don't always know what's happening with Roman. I mean, when you're a billionaire, you're doing billionaire things. I'm always saying that. We don't know what the hell you're doing, but I'm just thinking, surely he's not going to be as impressed. And for me, it's more the planning. I think it's the players we target and look at, and then second, it's the negotiation tactics and styles that we use. I've said it so many times. I don't know why we wasted time looking at guys like Golovin, and then from what you were saying too, to use this guy, as part of the forward lineup as well, which seems pretty weird. And then targeting Rugani and then looking at Caldara, and it's just like Caldara and Rugani are two completely different styles of defenders. So it's just like, why? What is this? This fascination of always targeting defenders every year? It seems like such a waste of time. And the key positions, the forward areas, I think that's all we need to really do to improve. There's players on the market right now. It's not as if there's players that you have to really negotiate hard for to try and persuade to sign for you. I mean, there's players that would happily sign, and it comes down to the negotiating, and that's a disappointing thing that we've gone backwards when it comes to that. And I mean, are you optimistic for the future? I mean, let's say hypothetically Barrett becomes the director of football. Would anything change in that matter, or are we just praying that maybe Marina will wake up one day and realize, oh shit, maybe I got to do things differently?
I think probably I don't want to say it's the biggest issue, but an issue, at least for me, is that at the moment there's a guy at Chelsea called Scott McLaughlin, who is Chelsea's head of international scouting, and this is a guy who is very big into his analytics. So a lot of his scouting is primarily driven by data, and there's nothing wrong with that in any case. But his experience previous to Chelsea, I think he was at Fulham and maybe another sort of relatively kind of lower kind of end team, and he's now coming in. And I think since he's been at the club, the sort of the excellent scouting we did in Belgium when we were able to pick up Lukaku, Courtois, and De Bruyne for about £20 million, that really was nothing to do with McLaughlin. I'm not even sure if he was at the club then, but since he's come in, I mean, he is the prime footballing voice that Marina Granovskaya talks to on a day-to-day basis, and this is the guy behind the kind of Ross Barkley deals, and I imagine Danny Drinkwater. I'm looking at a lot of sort of the English talent that this guy is apparently, that's what he's renowned for, being able to find English talent. So I'm looking at him, and I'm just sort of thinking, from a recommendation standpoint, who is he recommending? Because for the past, let's say, 4 or 5 years, I mean, we've maybe signed a handful of top players, and the other ones have been, sort of the Zappacosta level and your sort of Danny Drinkwaters and players who really have no business being in a Chelsea squad. I mean, he's, again, you look at players someone like Kante, but I mean, I don't need a scout to tell me that N'Golo Kante was a good footballer. I need him to go and find me the next Kevin De Bruyne or the next Lukaku, the players that we were bringing in at young ages. Even Oscar, someone found Oscar, and okay, he didn't pan out the way we wanted him to, but I mean, he was an incredibly high talent, high ceiling guy, maybe under the wrong manager. But those really young players that we were identifying kind of in that period, and then now we've transitioned to buying, players, as I said, like Ross Barkley. He may do well, but I mean, again, it's getting someone in on the cheap, getting someone with a big injury record. Those sorts of players that we seem to be going for. So I mean, for me, I think Granovskaya, the one thing that she needs, I think, is a fresh pair of eyes in that scouting area. If you're not an expert in an area, and I'm telling you I'm an expert, and then this is what you should be listening to, then more often than not, you're going to listen to me, regardless of how many times I get things wrong. You're just going to go, oh yeah, this is the right thing to do. And I think maybe she's a little bit too reliant on him and his recommendations in his area, because we've gone from being able to find from maybe 2012 to 2014, 15. Some really, really talented players that not that many people knew about, you know, discovering the De Bruynes of this world. Even guys like Mohamed Salah, you know, I mean, we've actually brought in a lot of talent that subsequently left the club. And I don't see that with McLaughlin. I don't see him bringing in that level of talent. Because, again, you know, these aren't players that we sign for loads of money. I think Courtois was less than £10 million. And, all right, and if he was on a proper length contract, he's probably a £80 million, £90 million goalkeeper. So, you know, I think for me, I think she gets a little bit too much stick because she's not scouting players. She's not sitting there on YouTube and Football Manager and, you know, pace 20, power 20. Is he from Africa? Like, put him in the team. You know, that's not happening. So I think, maybe she's too guilty of listening to this McLaughlin guy. But I would hope if someone like Ballot came in, that maybe I think his views on football and the way Premier League football should be played. And I think, again, we saw recently he was very positive about Chelsea's academy, and generally I think he's positive about young players. But you would see a slight dynamic there, because if he could direct the scouts, these are the kinds of players that we need at Chelsea. They can't go off and start looking at, you know, championship level footballers or Ross Barkley's and Drinkwaters. They have to go and start looking at what he says. So that's my one hope, that if he does come in, he changes the profile of players that we start looking at, because we do have excellent scouts. We've had scouts who have found some fantastic players over the past couple of years. I think we've had the wrong managers at the time to utilise them or to develop them, but it doesn't detract from the fact that we signed, at one point we could have had Lukaku, Salah, De Bruyne, and we still have Courtois. And even Hazard at 32 million is a steal. So, you know, might as well say 5 players, you know, that would have completely changed the dynamic of Chelsea Football Club. So we can scout players like that. We can find players, but I think a lot of that is on McLaughlin, and he seems to get a bit of a pass among Chelsea fans. I know not everyone's going to know who the head of scouting is at Chelsea, but this is the guy who, for me, is doing the recommendations on players. So when kind of Sky is getting stick for buying some absolute random, you know, it's not really her. All she's doing is then trying to negotiate for the player. So, you know, I think that aspect could be done better. I think that we could play ball a little bit more with teams, but you know, I think that's a style, and maybe that's what she's been instructed to do, is to make sure that we're not spending or investing too much on players. You just don't know really at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a very amazing distinction to make, and you know, obviously, the point you raise about, you know, Scott, that's a perspective that I think a lot of fans, you know, needed to hear and understand. So I think a lot of times, you know, things do get blurred. You know, as you said, Marina isn't scouting these players. We know that she had her team once Emanalo left, and if anything, it does make it even more, you know, depressing, because you know we had Emanalo, and you know, I mean, you know, all the players we were talking about was down to him, his scouting system, and you know, with Scott so far, you know, again, I was hearing this strategy too, which has been backed up by our recent signings of looking towards the English market, you know, targeting guys, looking at guys like Luke Shaw and your Jack Grealishes, and guys that aren't going to upgrade the team whatsoever. And you know, in a way, again, and, you know, when it comes down to stats, let's be serious. It's how you interpret them and how you analyze them, and that's always in a very, you know, person to person. So let's not be like, oh shit, you know, it's all this stupid data stuff. Let's go to the stadium and just watch them. Of course, they do that as well, you guys. But yeah, I mean, maybe instead of fans saying Marina out, they should be saying Scott McLaughlin out. Is that? No, I'm joking. You guys don't do that. Let's not make it more hateful on Twitter. You know what I mean?
The new agenda.
Yeah. New agenda. I mean, need one. I mean, it goes in stages. It was Emanalo, then it was Marina. Now I think it's Scott's turn right now. You know what I mean? You have to share it out a bit.
I think what Emanalo was good at was he was great at listening to incredibly experienced scouts that we had in various systems. So this guy Hillian and these other guys that you're sort of familiar with that looked at the exactly, sort of French and Belgian markets. You know, he knew that these guys were experts in their field, and when they recommended players strongly, you know, he was the one who suggested, okay, let's go for them. So I think with McLaughlin, he is more of a follow the data guy. So, you know, the data says that this guy has got a goal contribution of this, he can do this, you know, X, Y, Z advanced stats. But you know, sometimes, I mean, I think if it doesn't, you know, if players don't pass the eye test, then, you know, it doesn't matter if they might contribute a goal every 90 minutes. You know, if they are doing that because they're playing as a substitute and they're getting 3 minutes here and there or whatever, and they seem to just, every 60 games, whatever, they're contributing to goal. It doesn't really mean anything to me. So I think maybe it's just a question of how we're scouting and going back to maybe, I'm not saying it's like a more traditional method. I mean, I'm someone who works with data and numbers every day, so I can see the inherent value of them. But I think when you're trying to kind of fit a player to your conclusion through numbers, I think that's the wrong way to go. So, I would much prefer to see us go back to looking at scouting and then looking at the numbers thereafter. Say, this player in the German league looks fantastic. Let's have a look at his data and see if that looks at, if that kind of tallies up with what I've been seeing for the past 10 games. It could be that this person just looks good in a 5-game stretch and is actually terrible. I mean, we've seen, it was the guy at Michu, the guy at Swansea, that looked like the world's best centre forward for like a season, and then he's like in the Spanish 50-50 division or something. So, I mean, it's just a question of, I think we've maybe changed the way we scout. You might pick up someone like Ampadu here or there, which I think is also a bonus. But I mean, when you're bringing in, for every Ampadu, you're bringing in a Zappacosta and a Drinkwater, and for me, it's just sinking and wasting money. And I think the worst thing, and probably the last thing I wanted to make, is that at Chelsea there is now a very, very strict focus on how much money we spend, and I think everyone should obviously be very much in tune with that now. So when you're sinking 35, 40 million, 50 million pounds into players, and the return you're getting on them is absolutely nothing, you're not getting anything with Drinkwater. Morata, to me, looks like it's a sunken cost. That's not something you can't just then go the next season and go and spend it all again. I mean, I don't think we're in a position where we can spend that sort of money every single summer comfortably. So, we're in a position where we have to get more of these decisions right than wrong. And I think at the moment, if you're looking at maybe the balance of signings we've made over the past 4 or 5 seasons, I think we've probably got more wrong than we have got right. So, it's a question of not spending that money on players that are frankly incredibly average or mediocre, and trying to maybe invest in some slightly better quality players. But it's a decision the club have made. It's kind of the model they've pursued. That they will point to 2 league titles, in the past 3-4 years or whatever it is. Equally, I think people will point to the fact that we're not actually a consistent top 4 side anymore as well, which is the flip side to that. So, I think there is some work on the strategy side of things, and I think that's where having a strong director of football comes into play. I think that's really what we're missing. I know you made a perfect point earlier. We're looking at 2 centre-backs, both Italian, both entirely opposite to one another. So what's sort of the common theme? If you're looking for players, there should be similarities in what you're after. There should be a similar style of player, and I don't think we have that. So, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I think the next couple of days, hopefully, we bring a couple of players in, but I'm not holding my breath at this point.
Great way to end things. And I'm not holding my breath too much. I mean, if anything, I think capturing Jorginho, his signing really goes against the balance in which we've normally, he goes against the grain, Jorginho, signing one of the top players in his position, in his type of role in the world, beating Man City to his signature on top of that, and obviously not strengthening your rivals as well. I don't know how we did that. I mean, that's probably just down to the Sarri deal. But it's going to be interesting to see. As I've been saying for a while, I'm not going to be surprised to see some Zappacosta players sign near the end. I think there's a possibility that Zaha could be someone. And to be honest, I think he's a pretty good player. To be honest, I think he showed last year that he can grow, and I think he needs the right supporting cast around him. When you're playing for Crystal Palace, it's completely different than playing for Chelsea, especially now that Sarri is the new manager here. And I think he'd be an astute signing because of that versatility. I think Martial, he needs to come. I don't think we can have both Mitchell and Morata for this season, to be honest. I think it's got to be one of them. I'd probably go for Mitchell because I think he's a goal scorer and he's going to suit Sarri more. And, Sarri's already sweet-talking him already. So, that's pretty interesting with that. And that's it. I think they're the only 2 players we need. And I don't think it's too impossible. As long as we don't target other positions, we don't need to. I think we should be able to get them. I mean, my only slight worry too is selling players, because I'm thinking now it's probably the best time we can get the highest value for these guys. Let's say after a season's gone, it's next season. Let's say guys like Baka only played, I don't know, 15 games. Drinkwater played 20, 15 games or whatever. you can't command as much money for these guys, and on top of that, you're paying them their high wages as well. It's just a case of diminishing returns. You're not getting as much money back, and you can't really do much with that. But yeah, I'm just praying for Martial, and I'll take Zaha. I think with with Leon Bailey, I think things have cooled off a lot with that now. I think with Craig Butler too, from everything I'm hearing. So I think those two guys, I think we sign them, we can still contend for the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think even kind of as it stands, I mean, there should be enough in the squad to get top four. That has to be the absolute bare minimum requirement for this season. If we get Zaha, if we get Martial, if we get just a little bit more firepower, I'd be quite confident in saying that we can push City for the title. But it's going to be definitely an interesting thing. I mean, the point you make about Bailey is incredibly spot on. There is no interest in him from anyone in Europe at the moment, primarily because of his agents and representatives are, by all accounts, absolute psychopaths. So I mean, there's no chance of seeing him, I think, move anywhere, I would say, for maybe a season or two. But yeah, I'm looking hopefully at just getting in 2 more football players, and I think we should be fine. I think it's a title challenge. Hopefully, we can push far in the Europa League as well. I think that's a competition that we need to take seriously. 100%. We need to take it seriously. But yeah, I mean, I'd settle for second, third, and I'd love us to win the Europa League again. So but it's going to be definitely an interesting few days. I mean, there's reports coming out now. Just had a quick look on Twitter that we've contacted Zaha this evening, apparently. So
no surprise.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, so that's looking good. I'm just hoping to hear more on Martial. I mean, everything I'm hearing is still everything's still on the same level. Nothing's gone to another level so far with negotiations, and I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Willian. I mean, that's something I'm really looking at. And do you want to talk about Willian for maybe 5 more minutes? Because I think then it's like an hour. So what's your thoughts on everything happening with Willian right now?
I mean, part of me thinks that he'd probably be a pretty decent player under Sarri. The other part of me is looking at him as maybe direct competition for Hudson-Odoi, and I mean, kind of obviously, I would like Hudson-Odoi to get as many opportunities as possible this season. I think there is still likelihood that he ends up at Manchester United. I mean, there's not an incredibly well-kept secret that Willian and Jose Mourinho are incredibly close, and I think Willian is one of sort of Jose Mourinho's players. And I think Willian would probably do okay up there. I think the issue for me will be, again, if we sell another player to Manchester United, and yet we know from the history that when we were chasing Rooney, thankfully they didn't sell him to us, but they're very reluctant to sell any player to us. So why we are so comfortable entertaining them to sell players, for me, is a little bit strange. We did it with Mata. We've done it with Matic.
Yeah, I know.
Did it with Willian. There's 3 players, and I don't think they've ever sold us anyone that we've been looking at from them in the past number of years. So,
for example,
the Rooney example is one that people forget. Is we were so pushing incredibly hard for him one summer. Personal terms, the whole thing was agreed. I think this was when JT was still there. JT and Rooney were incredibly friendly. And I don't know. It's one of those where I think if Willian stays, fair enough. If he goes, to Man United and we don't get Martial in return, I think then questions really need to be asked of the club. Because, as I said, it's the 3rd player we're sending to Manchester United who's going to improve them and push them further away from us. We did finish 5th. They did finish, I think they finished 2nd. So we're increasing them as a quality. We're removing quality from our squad. So if we don't get Martial, then I think that we need to start looking at ourselves a little bit more closely. But yeah, tricky one. I think the whole passport situation was a bit of a red herring. I don't think Sarri was really too bothered. I think he obviously wants to just have a chat with some of these players face to face and try and talk them into the process and look at the kind of the plan that he has and how they fit into it and stuff like that. So, if he stays, he stays. If he goes, I think we'll get pretty good money for him. But if he goes to Manchester United and Martial ends up at Bayern Munich or somewhere else, And I do think we need to ask some questions ourselves, because, as I said, it'll be the third player we sent to them that strengthens them. And at the moment, they are second best team in the country, and we are the fifth. So why we continually want to strengthen them without getting anything in return is crazy.
Exactly. And I'm hoping it's not going to be a case of, third time unlucky. Again, I think for this deal to get done quickly, as we saw with Sanchez and Mkhitaryan, I don't think it'll be a case of just swapping players for players, but I think that it'll be something like, I don't know, let's say United get Willian for, I don't know, 40 or 50, we sign Martial for 50 or 60. I think it makes sense for both parties, and I think that's the only way I can see this still getting done pretty quickly, because I think when it comes to agreeing terms for Martial, that'll be very easy. I mean, the guy's on 65k a week at United, so all you'd have to do is double that, and he's still not even one of the highest paid players, within the wage structure. So that would be a pretty standard. But it's just a matter of time. I'm just hoping to hear more on him, to be honest. That's every day I'm waking up, I'm checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping to hear some stuff from Martial. But it was a great point you made. We keep letting United get what they want. We're not getting anything in return. But I think maybe, with how desperate Mourinho is to, we can't forget that Mourinho is under a lot of pressure this season, because he has had a lot of investment by people at United in terms of getting the players he wants, signing guys like Lukaku and Pogba for incredible amounts of money, players that cost more than 100 million once you do everything, and their wages on top of that. And people at United want results now, and I think with Mourinho, I can imagine him relying more on experience. I don't think he wants to lose the Man United job, to be honest. And again, I think that's the only factor I can see working in our favour. Mourinho, I'm being under pressure, but fine to work with experienced players. I think he'd happily play Willian over Martial, for example, because he knows that Willian will track back for him. So I think I'm still feeling optimistic with this. I think there's so many factors in play that can just work towards something happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think Martial is getting that sort of treatment from Mourinho that we as Chelsea fans are quite familiar, particularly Mourinho in his second stint. I think we, his ability to fall out with players is spectacular now, particularly sort of attacking players. And Willian is a fantastic and willing runner, and maybe that's not something that Martial is not known for. I don't think it's the side of his game that is particularly bad. I think he's pretty good at it, but Willian is, as you're saying, experienced. And I think it's the same. You look at managers like Conte and you look at managers like Mourinho, and there is a real prevalence to use and utilise experienced professionals. And I think it's because, they don't have to focus on the coaching aspect of guys in their early 20s. Once you sort of hit 25, 26, 27, you kind of sort of know your way around your kind of role and sort of, what's sort of expected of you. But when you look at some of these younger players, they're still very much learning kind of the ropes. And I think now you can see with Mourinho that maybe that aspect of his ability to coach is I don't want to say it's disappeared, but I just don't see it with any of his players that are coming through. I don't see young players with potential being developed into star players. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at someone like Arjen Robben, first time around at Chelsea. He arrived at Chelsea from Groningen, who were like, or was it PSV? I can't remember. PSV, yeah. He arrived as a good player, but he left Chelsea as an absolute monster. And there were a lot of young players, JT, Frank. I mean, a lot of that spine of that team that came in at Chelsea were very young when Mourinho took over, and that ability to take them from being good players to world-class players. I mean, that for me seems to have disappeared. So I look at Martial and I see not only has he got raw potential, but I think that there is a very good player, in there somewhere that you see flashes of for Manchester United, but I don't think Mourinho is the right coach to develop him. So if Mourinho is under pressure to win now, and it feels like for Manchester United fans, it feels like for the media, it feels like probably Manchester United themselves, they've spent so much money and they've invested so much money and energy into Mourinho that he's going to have to deliver this season. I mean, he's already trying to deflect it onto Klopp and Liverpool spending, so he's already starting those tactics early. So, but for me, if Manchester United don't win the league this season, then I think Mourinho goes, and that has to be the case, because you can't spend that sort of money that he has you know, he's almost exclusively taken over sort of the transfer element as well. Obviously, he's maybe not getting his way as much this season, but
Yeah.
you know, I think a lot of the players that they've signed have been upon his recommendations. So, you know, I think Martial and Williams what makes sense. I think really it's just a better fit for both players, and maybe if there's some sense in Chelsea and there's some sense at Manchester United that potentially that swap deal can happen. But
yeah.
I think my personal opinion is I think Mourinho is terrified of letting Martial come to Chelsea and Martial turning into this like absolute fantastic player, because again, we've seen it with Kevin De Bruyne, we've seen it with Mohamed Salah, we've seen it with Romelu Lukaku. You know, these guys who were shipped out far too soon, not because Mourinho said so, who have now gone on to become some of the best players in the league. Yeah. Absolute, you know, ballers, top, you know, goal scorers, top goal scorer, banging in goals, left, right, and centre, most creative player, all these sorts of things. And I think for me that there's a fear that happens again, and particularly obviously with his history at Chelsea, I think that may also come into play, in that he doesn't want to see a player that is at Chelsea absolutely kill it. You know, Martial with Hazard and Zaha or Hudson-Odoi or whoever on the right hand side, it's a pretty good front three. I mean, you know, it's going to be pretty difficult to stop them. So, you know, you're chucking Batshuayi and whoever else. I mean, it's a really good set of players. So maybe Mourinho is being a bit cute with his, you know, not letting Martial come to Chelsea. But, you know, as I said before, if we do sell them Willian and we don't get Martial in return, or, you know, pay another 20 million plus Martial, whatever it's going to be, I really do think that the club needs to start asking questions of what they're doing, because you cannot keep strengthening your rivals and not getting anything in return apart from a fairly decent transfer fee, because it just doesn't make any sense.
Of course, it makes no sense, because again, you know, it's a sport. At the end of the day, you're trying to compete to win things, and you know, if you're not in it to win it, then why even get involved in this industry?
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, just very brief. Who do you think? I mean, I'm guessing it'll be Roman that would have to. I don't know why I said it like that, but I guess it'll be Roman that would have to, you know, start looking at people and start, you know, making people accountable.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is very interesting at Chelsea is that Abramovich is incredibly loyal to his inner circle. You know, Granovskaya, Bruce Buck, Eugene Tenenbaum, all these sorts of names that you're familiar with that have been at Chelsea since day dot. Very rarely does Roman like to shake the kind of tree of that sort of football board, that kind of executive area. Yet when it comes to managers, when it comes to players, you know, that there is a ruthlessness there in dealing with, I mean, even managers who perform well. I mean, we sacked Carlo Ancelotti when he finished second in the Premier League in the halls of Goodison, you know, the kind of hallways of Goodison Park, which is about as cutthroat and ruthless as you can be. Yet, to your point there, I mean, I don't think that the guys who run the club are in any way, shape or form held to the same level of accountability. And maybe it's different pressures, and maybe there's different trusts involved, and maybe the guys who you know, obviously managing the club are seen as slightly more expendable. But I would imagine that it's a lot more expensive to sack Antonio Conte than it is to get rid of someone in sort of the club board level. So I mean, that aspect probably isn't coming into play. I just think it comes down to trust, and you know, there's a real kind of reluctance from Chelsea to open up that kind of football board area and really kind of get into the details of who does what. And maybe that's just how it is. Maybe Roman implicitly trusts these people, and you know, I don't see him questioning. I don't see any kind of pressure on anyone at the club to do anything other than what they're doing. So, you know, it's an interesting one. I think it's particularly interesting when you look at how we deal with managers. You know, look how petty we've been with Conte. You know, we kept him hanging around for nearly 2 months and then sack him. You know, maybe potentially, you know, in his eyes, ruined his ability to go and manage other teams because we didn't fire him. So, you know, I think that there's a ruthlessness there that isn't reflected in that area of the club. And I think it's just a question of Abramovich just trusts these people, maybe too much, but you know, it's a question of he thinks that he must be thinking that they're doing a pretty good job, and maybe they are, you know, privy to his instructions of doing exactly what he's asking them to do. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, but that's probably going to bring an end to today's stream. We've covered a lot of great topics, and I'm kind of thinking that I might have to download this video afterwards and try and, you know, cut this, you know, podcast / live stream into a few pieces. I think that a lot of people should hear about the Scott points and the points on Willian and, you know, Martial and United. I think it'll be interesting to hear. But you guys, thank you for watching today's stream. You know what to do. Hit that like button. Help me get more than 500 likes for today's video. Thank you for watching. I'm EFC. This is Blue Lions TV. Signing out.